Everybody has the page. We have stopped on page 211 at the break. And this is a very difficult part of Savitri to read. This is when King Aswapati, as part of his quest to find the principle, the power that will be able to turn our earthly life into a divine life, he finds that he has to go right down into the very depths of falsehood to find the root of all that is evil and terrible in our world. He does succeed in finding that key, but we haven't found it yet. We are still on the downward path, the descent into night. So I'm going to read some lines, and then we go back to this point on page 211, and we will look at the passage in more detail. For now, I'm just going to read. A greater darkness waited, a worse reign, if worse can be, where all is evil's extreme. Yet to the cloaked, the uncloaked is naked worst. There God and truth and the supernal light had never been, or else had power no more. As when one slips in a deep moment's trance over mind's border into another world, he crossed a boundary whose stealthy trace I could not see, but only the soul feel. Into an armored, fierce domain he came, and saw himself wandering like a lost soul amid grimed walls and savage slums of night. Around him crowded grey and squalid huts, neighbouring proud palaces of perverted power, inhuman quarters and demoniac wards. A pride in evil hugged its wretchedness, a misery haunting splendour pressed those fell, dun suburbs of the cities of dream life. There, life displayed to the spectator soul the shadow depths of her strange miracle. A strong and fallen goddess without hope, obscured, deformed by some dire Gorgon spell, as might a harlot, empress in a bouge, nude, unashamed, exulting, she upraised her evil face of perilous beauty and charm, and drawing panic to a shuddering kiss twixt the magnificence of her fatal breasts, allured to their abyss the spirits fall. Across his field of sight she multiplied as on a scenic film or moving plate the implacable splendor of her nightmare pomps. On the dark background of a soulless world, she staged between a lurid light and shade her dramas of the sorrow of the depths, written on the agonized nerves of living things, epics of horror and grim majesty, wry statues spat and stiffened in life's mud, a glut of hideous forms and hideous deeds paralyzed pity in the hardened breast. In booths of sin and night repairs of vice, styled infamies of the body's concupiscence and sordid imaginations etched in flesh, turned lust into a decorative art. Abusing nature's gift, her pervert skill immortalized the sown grain of living death. In a mud goblet poured the Bacchic wine, to a satyr gave the thyrsus of a god. It's a very, very terrible picture that he paints. I think last time that we read this book, perhaps we avoided some of these worst passages, but we've decided this time to read the whole book. So we can go back to the break on page 211. Dana, would you begin?
The greater darkness waited the world's reign. If worse can be bad, all its evils extreme. Yet to the cloaked, the uncloaked is naked first. There, God in truth and the supernal light had never been, or else had never had power no more.
Yes. Last time we read how he is traveling downwards and nobody stops him because he's missioned from the heights of consciousness on this terrible journey. He's going there with a mission, and those terrible depths, they are very ready to swallow him up. They don't want to obstruct him in any way. No? So none stood across his way. No voice forbade. Nobody said, no, don't pass this way. For swift and easy is the downward path. And now towards the night was turned his face. This first line is easy to understand, no? That as he goes down, the darkness gets thicker, no? And that reign of darkness and evil becomes even worse. The poet says, if worse can be, where everything is already the extreme of evil. But it's worse in the sense to, if something is covered up, it's in some way somewhat less awful. When it's opened up and revealed, the uncloaked, that is then naked, worst. We see clearly what is so terrible. in that realm where he's entering now, God and truth and the supreme light had never been. It feels like that they never existed, they never were. Or, at least, if they had been, now it's clear that they no longer have any power or influence. So the next sentence describes that downward journey. Yes.
As when one slips in a deep moment's trance, over mind's border into another world, he crossed a boundary whose
stealthy trace. Yeah.
I could not see, but only the soul feel.
Yes. So Sri Aurobindo says, it's like sometimes if you are concentrating or falling asleep, in a deep moment's trance, one may cross a kind of border of consciousness. We cross over mind's border into another world. So it's like that, as King Aswapati goes down, he just slips over a boundary. He couldn't see where is that boundary, where is that limit, but the soul could feel it very clearly, that now we're crossing over a frontier into an even worse state. No? Suresh?
Into an armor,
fierce
domain he came, and saw himself wandering like a lost soul, amid
grimed wall.
walls and serried slants of night.
Yes. So, at this new realm that he's coming into is armored. Everybody has to have a weapon. And it's a very fierce domain. Fierce is a word we would apply to a lion or a tiger or something dangerous animal. No? And he perceives that he is wandering himself like a lost soul. And around him, it's really terrible, like a city. Grimed walls. The walls of the buildings are very dirty because these are slums. We know that around cities all over the world there are areas where people have to live in very terrible conditions, where there's very little room, they don't have proper houses, there's no proper water supply or sanitation. So it is like that, savage slums of night. And in slums, very often under the influence of those unpleasant, unbearably unpleasant environments, people become savage, no? And feel they have to behave badly to each other and to anybody who comes. No?
Around him, covered great and
Squalid.
at neighboring proud places of
Perverted
power, inhuman quarters and demonic words.
Yes. Squalid means they're really dirty and full of rubbish and just huts, no proper place to live. No? But they are surrounding, there are proud palaces. There are powerful people there who have big palaces and fortresses to live in. Those are powerful people, but their power is perverted. It is turned to evil ends. These are the places where people have to live, are inhuman quarters. When something is inhuman, we feel that no human being should have to live like that. Quarters in a city, they will be divided up into quarters, but also we can think of quarters being places where people live. They don't have a permanent home, but they're given some quarters where they can stay. And wards, the city is divided up into wards where there are watchmen who keep watch. But these are demoniac wards. They're full of demonic beings. Kamala.
A bride in evil earth, its brightness, a misery hunting, splendor pressed those foul, done suburbs of the cities of the dream life.
Yes. So even the beings who are there, they take some pride in being the way that they are, and they cling on to their wretchedness, to that terrible condition that they're in. And there's, of course, a sense of misery, of painful unhappiness. But it's haunting, it's hanging around those splendid palaces. It's oppressing, he says, oppressed, those fell, dun suburbs of the cities of dream life. The suburbs are the part around the outside of the city, the center of the city. And the suburbs are often where the slums are. Fell means terrible. Dun means grey and colorless. So he's seeing these suburbs and cities of dream life. Would you like to read? Would you like to read?
Their life displayed to the spectator's soul the shadow depths of her strange miracle. A strong and fallen goddess without hope, obscured, deformed by some dire Gorgon spell, as might a harlot empress in a bouge, nude, unashamed, exulting, she upraised her evil face of perilous beauty and charm, and drawing panic to a shuddering kiss twixt the magnificence of her fatal breasts, allured to their abyss the spirits fall.
It's really a terrible picture. We've been reading about the life goddess in her many different states. How she was the gracious, great winged angel coming down to earth and pouring all her beauty and joy and getting swallowed up in matter so that she could only express her life force in very primitive, simple life forms that almost one would think there's no point in them being alive at all. And then we've gradually seen the evolving life in matter, the different forms that it takes. But now again, we're having to go back, not just to primitive life forms, but to something really distorted, twisted. He uses this word, perverted, no? So here is this awful picture of life. She's still a strong goddess, but she's a fallen goddess. She has fallen from her divine state, and she knows that she's fallen. She has no hope. Whatever is divine in her is obscured, hidden by shadows, deformed, twisted by some dire, some terrible Gorgon spell. This word Gorgon refers to a figure, also a very tragic sort of figure in Greek mythology, who has been she's actually really a monster. She's been turned into a monster, and her appearance is so terrible that anybody who sees her will be turned to stone. And there's one of the legends, one of the old Greek legends, about how the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom and power, she empowers a Greek hero to go and find that monster and destroy her, to cut off her head and bring it back to Athena. So the goddess Athena is wearing this Gorgon monster on her shield. She keeps it covered up, but whenever she has to confront some bad thing, she can reveal it and turn it into stone. So, but the image is of a tortured, suffering face, and all her hair has been turned into poisonous snakes. So sometimes we see this picture of the Gorgon. So life is something like that. And 𝒔𝒆 is seeing her in a very degraded condition. One of these places where one can go and meet prostitutes, and there she is the ruling one. She is like an empress in a bouge, in one of those very low places. There she's uncovered, nude, unashamed, even showing off. She's raising up her evil face of perilous beauty, dangerous beauty and dangerous charm, and somehow forcing people to embrace her. All these characteristics of hers are alluring the spirit's fall down into this terrible condition which life itself has fallen. Alice.
Across his field of sight, she multiplied as on a scenic film or moving plate, the implacable splendor of her nightmare haunts. On the dark background of the soulless world, she staged between the lurid light and shade her dramas of the sorrow of the depths, written on the agonized nerves of living things. Epics of horror and grim majesty, rise statues spat, stiffened in life's mud, the blood of hideous forms, hideous deeds, paralyzed pity in the hardened breast.
Yes. So this is what all the horrors that King 𝒔𝒆 is witnessing on his way deep down to the root of falsehood and evil. So life there, this is what she's showing him. Across his field of sight, his field of vision, life is multiplying, showing him more and more images, as if it's a film or a moving plate, showing him the splendor, the implacable splendor of her nightmare pomps. All the most gorgeous things she can show, they are so terrible. Implacable, it means not showing any pity at all. On the dark background of this soulless world, this world without soul, she's staging her dramas between a lurid light, a shining red hot light, and a darkness. She's showing her dramas of the sorrow of the depths, the deepest, lowest levels of consciousness. And those dramas, it's as if they're being written on the agonized nerves of living things. Those who see them, those who experience them, are suffering terribly, terrible pain. What she's showing are epics. You know, sometimes in the cinemas they show epic stories with huge casts and all very, very brightly colored. These are epics of horror and grim majesty, something that's cruel and ruthless. He sees statues, they are twisted, and it's as if they are spitting and stiffening in the mud of life. There's a glut. A glut is when there is too much. Sometimes it happens, farmers are growing tomatoes and suddenly everybody's growing tomatoes and there are far too many of them and nobody wants them anymore. No? It's when there's a glut, there's too much. A glut of hideous forms, terribly ugly forms, and hideous deeds. They not only look awful, what they do, the way they behave, is so horrible and terrible. And it's so terrible that one can't even feel pity anymore. There's so much to be disgusted by and troubled by. Would you read, please?
𝒉𝒆𝒓𝒆 and 𝒉𝒆𝒓𝒆 style in the Venus of the body's
Concupiscence.
And sordid imaginations etched in flesh, turned lust into a decorative art, abusing nature's gift, her preserved skin, immortalized the soul grave of living belly, in a mud goblet poured the 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂
Yes. So this is about sexuality. No? There are places where people go at night. Night repairs of vice. There they misuse their bodies. But it's almost as if they're doing it as a kind of art, styled infamies, disgusting, terrible things of the body's concupiscence. Concupiscence is sexual desire, sordid imaginations. It's being actually etched out, put into pictures in flesh. all this turns lust, sexual desire, into a decorative art, abusing nature's gift of beauty and delight. Now the pervert skill of this distorted life goddess gives immortality to this grain, to these seeds of living death. The Bacchic wine is the wine of divine delight, divine intoxication. But here, that divine delight is poured not into a beautiful glass or golden cup, but into a mud goblet. It's made out of mud, even perhaps dirty mud. That wine of delight. To a satyr, these are also creatures from ancient Greek and Latin mythology. They are little demonic beings. They have something like human faces. They have bodies of a goat. They walk on their hind legs, and they have the little pointed ears and horns. They're kind of small devils. So, to a satyr, they're also supposed to be very, very lustful, full of sexual desire, uncontrollable. So, to a satyr, she gives the Thyrsus the staff and rod of power which should belong to a god. Would you read Ganga Lakshmi?
Impure, sadistic, with grimacing mouth, graveful, invention, gruesome, and macabre. Television from the gulfs of night. Clear craft and genius in monstruosity, impassion of all natural shape and poise. A gap of new, exaggerate lines, gave caricature a stark reality. An appearance of well-distorted form, and the gargoyle mask obscene and terrible, trampled to tormented posture, to torn sense.
So impure, just the very opposite of pure and full of light. Sadistic, delighting in cruelty, with grimacing mouths, horrible expressions, these grey, foul, terrible inventions, gruesome, frightening even, and macabre, making us think of death and destruction, came televisioned from the gulfs of night. He sees them from a distance, as if they're being projected from the very depths of the night. These images from far away, from much deeper down, they are projected. He sees them. This is the craft, the skill of life. It's become ingenious, very skillful in monstrosity, in ugliness. It's impatient of all natural shape and poise. It's become a gape, an open gap of nude, of naked, exaggerated lines, is giving a stark, a terrible reality to caricature. Caricature is when you depict somebody or something in a distorted way. But even they're giving art parades of weird, distorted forms. We see films sometimes of the carnival, people celebrating together through the streets, dancing and with floats, and so it's something like that. But these are all weird, strange, horrible, distorted forms. A mask is a dance where people disguise themselves. So there are these gargoyle masks. A gargoyle is actually in the old cathedrals in Europe, on the edges of the roofs to catch the rainwater and direct it. It gets channeled through the mouths of carved stone creatures. And they're very often depicted like demons, like very ugly creatures. So it's obscene, it's disgusting and terrible. So the sense, King Āsvapati is perceiving all this through his senses, but the senses are being torn and tortured by these terrible images and pictures.
Shraddhavan, when Sri Aurobindo wrote this...
when did he write all this?
Sorry?
No, I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
He started this big expansion of King Āsvapati's yoga, I think towards the end of 1937 or 1938. So I think Dr. Nadkarni once has mentioned that perhaps all this was written during the war time. Yeah. And that's of course the terrible thing, that all these experiences, the good ones and the terrible ones, that Sri Aurobindo is writing them from experience. He's really gone through all this. And as I said, I think the last time we were reading, we avoided reading many of these passages. Would you read? Line 392. An inexorable
ego's worshipper, she made vileness great and sublimated filth, a dragon power of reptile energies, and strange epiphanies of traveling force, and serpent grandeurs couching in the mire, true adoration to a gleam of sight.
You can continue, please.
All nature pulled out of her frame and base was twisted into an unnatural pose. Repulsion stimulated inner desire. Agony was made the red-spiced food for bliss. Hatred was trusted with the work of lust, and torture took the form of an embrace. A ritual anguish consecrated death. Worship was offered to the undivine.
Yes, thank you. So life has become a worshipper of evil, and she becomes that in a very ruthless way, inexorable. She can't be softened or persuaded to do anything else. She's worshipping that inexorable evil. She's using her powers to make vileness, smallness, meanness, evil. She is making that great. And filth, dirtiness, she's lifting that up, sublimating it. There's a great power there, a dragon power, of reptile energies, and strange epiphanies of groveling force. Groveling is when you crawl in the ground, in the dirt. But an epiphany is actually normally, it's a word that means something like darshan. It means the revelation of something divine. Here it's as if this awful groveling force is showing itself in its most extreme form. Serpent grandeurs, couching, rolling and luxuriating in the mire, in the dirty mud, draws adoration to a gleam of slime, something sticky and dirty. In this realm which he's experiencing, all nature is pulled out of her true frame and her true foundation. It's twisted into an unnatural pose. So one feels, seeing, reading all this, one feels repulsion. One feels repelled. How disgusting, how awful. But that repulsion seems to stimulate desire. Maybe the desire had faded away, but it gets stimulated, excited by this repulsion. Agony, intense suffering was made like a spicy food for bliss, for delight. Hatred was trusted with the work of lust, and torture took the form of an embrace. This is what we mean by sadism. No? A ritual anguish consecrated death. Maybe we've read about this kind of thing too, of human sacrifice. Worship was offered to the undivine. Sorry, I can't see who's sitting at the back there. Would you read? Bhuvana.
A new emphasis of infernal spark that trained the mind to love was the soul will, imposed allegiance on the querying nerve and forced the unwilling body to vibrate. Too sweet and too harmonious to excite. In this regime that soiled the being's core, beauty was banned. The heart's feeling dull to sleep, and cherished in their place sensations thrill. The world was folk for jets of sense appeal. Here cold material intellect was the judge, and needed sensual prick and jaw and lash, that its hard dryness and dead nerves might feel some passion and power and every point of life.
Yes. A new aesthesis. This is aesthesis usually has to do with beauty, what you think of as beauty and the way you choose to create beauty. And this is an aesthesis of the art of inferno, of hell. This aesthesis, this approach to beauty, to creating beauty, imposed allegiance on the quivering nerves. It forces the nerves. The natural thing for our nerves to do is to enjoy and appreciate beauty. But instead they are forced to admire this new aesthesis that trains the mind to love what the soul hates, what is repulsive to the soul. So this new aesthesis imposed allegiance on the quivering nerves and forced the unwilling body to vibrate. Although the nerves don't want to, they can't help it. Beauty was banned. It's too sweet and too harmonious to excite in this regime, in this rule, which is soiling. It's as if it's dirtying the being to its very core, to its heart. Beauty was banned. The heart's natural responses are just dulled to sleep. And instead, what is cherished, what is valued, are the thrills of sensation. The world was probed for jets of sense appeal, things that would appeal to the senses. In this realm, cold, material intellect was the judge. The heart is lulled to sleep, only is left some mental power, which needs to be prodded and pricked, sensual prick, to be jogged and even lashed, whipped, to make its hard dryness and dead nerves to feel some passion and power and some acrid point of light. Something that's acrid is burning like acid. So I think we will stop there for today. If we're going to follow King Āsvapati in his whole journey, we have still quite a long way to go. This canto goes on until page 219. And then we've got Canto 8, The World of Falsehood. And it's really only at the end of Canto 8, on page 231, that Āsvapati finds what he was looking for, the secret key of nature's change. So when he finds it, everything does change for him. So we will have to be a little patient and exercise endurance and courage to go through all this dreadful journey.
But Shraddhavan, I have one question. Yesterday I was showing the BBC News the story about torture children, small children, and he described some part of the bed.
Yes.
And I am very, 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 and 𝒘𝐕𝐈 tell me when I discuss with him, take care about children of Orville. Now the forces play, especially in the world, not only in Africa, he's in Africa, but terrible.
Yes.
It is difficult to describe, but
we would prefer not to know about all these things, no? But the world is like that. This world of falsehood exists and exerts far too great an influence on the whole of humanity. So we can be very grateful that we've been shown another kind of existence, and we can follow King Āsvapati in his aspiration. He's seeing all this, he's exploring all this to find out how it can be changed definitively and forever.
But it's incredible. It's a barbarism.
It's worse than barbarism. Yeah, terrible.
It's especially children. So now also when children play in India, very, very small, we play theater, we play movie, we use the adults use children for the same.
Yes.
So for me it's also very good.
So Sri Aurobindo is sharing this knowledge with us for a reason, although it's very difficult to bear.
But I offer to Sri Aurobindo. I tell Sri Aurobindo is a descent in the night. Alors I close the TV, but it's
So, thanks to Sri Aurobindo for all he has done to change the world. What is Sri Aurobindo's work? To hasten the reign of the Divine's love on earth. That's the work that we are committed to. A greater darkness waited, a worse reign, if worse can be where all is evil's extreme. Yet to the cloaked, the uncloaked is naked worst. There God and truth and the supernal light had never been, or else had power no more. As when one slips in a deep moment's trance over mind's border into another world, he crossed a boundary whose stealthy trace I could not see, but only the soul feel. Into an armored, fierce domain he came, and saw himself wandering like a lost soul amid grimed walls and savage slums of night. Around him crowded grey and squalid huts, neighbouring proud palaces of perverted power, inhuman quarters and demoniac wards. A pride in evil hugged its wretchedness. A misery haunting splendour pressed those fell, dun suburbs of the cities of dream life. There life displayed to the spectator soul the shadow depths of her strange miracle. A strong and fallen goddess without hope, obscured, deformed by some dire Gorgon spell. As might a harlot, empress in a bouge, nude, unashamed, exulting, she upraised her evil face of perilous beauty and charm, and drawing panic to a shuddering kiss twixt the magnificence of her fatal breasts, allured to their abyss, the spirits fall. Across his field of sight she multiplied, as on a scenic film or moving plate, the implacable splendor of her nightmare pomps. On the dark background of a soulless world, she staged between a lurid light and shade her dramas of the sorrow of the depths, written on the agonized nerves of living things, epics of horror and grim majesty, wry statues spat and stiffened in life's mud, a glut of hideous forms and hideous deeds, paralyzed pity in the hardened breast. In booths of sin and night repairs of vice, styled infamies of the body's concupiscence, and sordid imaginations etched in flesh, turned lust into a decorative art, abusing nature's gift, her pervert skill immortalized the sown grain of living death. In a mud goblet poured the Bacchic wine, to a satyr gave the thyrsus of a god. Impure, sadistic, with grimacing mouths, grey foul inventions, gruesome and macabre, came televisioned from the gulfs of night. Her craft, ingenious in monstrosity, impatient of all natural shape and poise, agape of nude, exaggerated lines, gave caricature a stark reality, and art parades of weird, distorted forms, and gargoyle masks obscene and terrible, trampled to tormented postures the torn sense. An inexorable evil's worshipper, she made vileness great and sublimated filth. A dragon power of reptile energies and strange epiphanies of grovelling force, and serpent grandeurs couching in the mire, drew adoration to a gleam of slime. All nature pulled out of her frame and base, was twisted into an unnatural pose. Repulsion stimulated inert desire. Agony was made a red-spiced food for bliss. Hatred was trusted with the work of lust, and torture took the form of an embrace. A ritual anguish consecrated death. Worship was offered to the undivine. A new aesthesis of Inferno's art that trained the mind to love what the soul hates, imposed allegiance on the quivering nerves and forced the unwilling body to vibrate. Too sweet and too harmonious to excite in this regime that soiled the being's core. Beauty was banned. The heart's feeling dulled to sleep, and cherished in their place sensations' thrills. The world was probed for jets of sense appeal. Here, cold, material intellect was the judge, and needed sensual prick and jog and lash, that its hard dryness and dead nerves might feel some passion and power and acrid point of life.